Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Congressman, thank you for being here.
For sure.
So how was your week?
Eating. My week was quite eventful, to say the least. The Tuesday's results were not what I expected or what I thought the country needed, but we have to have an orderly transition, and I think we will have that according to the events that occurred today in Washington. And I'm hopeful that as we move forward into 2017, that the Congress and the new administration will work to try to heal the wounds that this campaign has caused and what we have experienced as a country over the last couple of years.
Yeah, you know, we're here to talk about a very specific issue, but it's obviously occurring within the context of what happened. We saw such fissures in the country. Hillary Clinton won the 100 largest counties in America by about 12 million votes and lost the rest of the country by almost exactly the same amount. Big divisions between city and country, particularly big divisions between white and non-white, particularly working class, non-college white voters. And how did, in your view, is there an obvious way forward to bridge some of these divides, or is this just our new reality that we have very different visions about where the country should go? And you saw some of those same patterns here in Missouri. How do we move forward as a country when we were so starkly divided in our preference over direction?
Well, first of all, I think we were lulled into a sense of a more diverse country by electing an African-American president twice. Which tells me that progressives in this country let their guard down. We kind of fell asleep at the switch. When you think about it, Donald Trump energized his base. They came out, we didn't, because for whatever reasons. Some thought we had a flawed candidate. Others were not satisfied with the Democratic nominee, and they either sat out this election, voted for a third party, or didn't participate. We get elections have consequences, and going forward, there will be consequences.
Yeah. You know, you wouldn't say the debate over criminal justice reform began here, because it had existed before, but it certainly reached critical mass here as a result of the events in Ferguson a few years ago. We are now more than 2 years down the road. There has been a great deal of discussion in Washington. There has been the emergence of a grassroots movement. There has been a counterforce, as we're talking about in this election. What do you think has changed since 2014, both nationally and locally in Missouri?
First of all, let's start with where I work in Congress. I think that since this summer, Speaker Ryan and the Republican leadership want to now address criminal justice reform, and it really got on their radar after the tragic incidents that occurred in Dallas with the targeting of police officers, and in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's what got their attention. For the Democrats, our attention came before the tragic incidents that occurred here with Michael Brown. And that just heightened our effort. And so the discussions have began. We may see progress on this issue made in the upcoming lame duck session.
Really?
Yes, the Speaker Ryan has appointed 5 members from his party, along with 5 members from the Congressional Black Caucus, to discuss criminal justice reform. We are trying to get a end product for next week, for the upcoming lame duck session. We know it'll take us into December. There will more than likely be at least the hearings on it, and then we'd have to start over in early January with the 115th Congress. So they realize that we have to address the inequities in our criminal justice system. We have to value all lives, especially black lives, and to and to hold law enforcement accountable when a black person loses their life at the hands of law enforcement. Right now, you don't see that happening. Now, locally here,
Yeah.
we have taken steps. We have taken steps, starting with, I think the biggest change for us is going to be in January when we have a new African-American female prosecutor here in the city of St. Louis. Kim Gardner was just elected on Tuesday for a 4-year term. And I believe that will make a difference in the delivery of criminal justice, of justice in this community. I think she can set a standard. She can set the bar on who we hold accountable for all crimes, be the crimes committed by citizens or police officers.
We'll come back to the local in a minute. Let's stick with the federal for a second.
Okay.
There has been, there were a bipartisan group of senators that also thought they had reached an agreement. In fact, have reached an agreement, at least among themselves, but that has been stalled in the Senate. Is that approach, is their bill a model for what you're doing in what's happening in the House? Or do you see are you going in a different direction?
I don't see us going in the same direction.
You don't.
What Speaker Ryan has asked for is a compilation of the legislation that different members have introduced. I've introduced 2 different pieces. One with my colleague and friend Steve Cohen of Memphis on training and retraining of police officers. And that also has in it the appointment of a special prosecutor whenever you have a loss of life in a police-involved shooting. The other one is the demilitarization of local police departments, introduced by Senator McCaskill and I, which also includes body cameras. And I think body cameras are important for law enforcement because it records what actually occurs. And there has to be consequences. They cannot turn off the cameras. They must keep those cameras operating in order to get the facts and to have a clearer understanding of the incidents.
And do you think Speaker Ryan would be willing to move forward on any of these issues before the new president takes office?
He has indicated that he would be. We're trying to get to a place where we can get some consensus in a bipartisan way. And so he has indicated, I don't view Speaker Ryan as a bad guy. And look, let's face it, the American public, after every election, they expect us to roll up our sleeves and get to work on their behalf. The election's over. We have to accept the consequences of the election and move forward. And so, and I will attempt to work with a Trump administration in that regard also.
What would you, I mean, as you watched this campaign, certainly Mr. Trump talked a lot about law and order. He was critical at different points of the Black Lives Matter movement, but in other ways, belatedly, in the final months of the campaign, he probably spent more time trying to appeal to African-American audiences, certainly than Mitt Romney did at the end. He tried to, make a case in a lot of different ways. What would you expect? Do you have any idea what to expect from him on these issues?
I can only go by what people who know Mr. Trump have told me. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. But my good friend who has represented New York for 40 years, Charlie Rangel, told me he has had a long-term relationship with Mr. Trump, and when a year and a half ago when Trump announced his presidential bid, he told me not to discount him. And he told me that Trump participated in a bipartisan way with both Republicans and Democrats before he decided to throw his hat into the ring, contributed to both parties and candidates from both sides of the aisle. So all I can do is to offer up proposals and see if he would be willing to consider those.
I want to talk about state and local, but I want to play just a quick word association, 3 words. Attorney General Giuliani.
God forbid.
Okay, there you go. Attorney General Christie? Better?
Probably.
Probably better.
Yeah, I mean, look, remember Christie did embrace Obama when Obama brought resources for the storm.
Yeah, at the end. You had a governor's race here in which, and again, I was not in Missouri. I was focusing mostly on the presidential race. But in all I've read, these issues were not front and center. Somewhat surprisingly to outsiders. I mean, there were articles written in, for example, in the Marshall Project, kind of in the place where this discussion began. This was not more front and center.
Sure.
What do you expect? I guess 2 questions. Why were those issues not more central? And then 2, what do you expect from the new governor here?
Look, well, I'll be honest with you. You're correct. Those issues were not addressed. It was more about, I guess, personal attacks, hot button issues. I did not hear the term body cameras used until I heard President Obama cut a radio ad for Chris Koster in the entire gubernatorial race. I didn't hear it.
But President Obama talked about it in the ad, but Chris Koster did not talk about it did not embrace the cause. And so what do you expect from the new governor? Do you expect hostility to this agenda, indifference, areas where he could support? What would you expect?
Now, I am willing to give the new governor a chance. I mean, look, we have to respect the wishes of the voters in this state.
Sure.
And we have to be willing to move forward and attempt to forge some kind of working relationship with a new Greitens administration, and realize that what's at stake here is our future, the future of the state, our community, and see. All we can do is try.
Yeah.
And see if someone is willing to work with us or not.
You know, often in our Next America project, where we focus on how growing diversity is changing the country, one of our big areas of focus is education. And often when we're having education discussions, the question that I ask when we're in different cities is, can you solve the problems of educational inequity solely within the borders of the 4 walls of the school and the hours from 9 to 3? Can schools be expected to solve these problems, or do you ultimately need to change kind of the economic opportunity that is available to parents in order to produce better outcomes for kids? I feel the same way. The same question applies to the criminal justice debate and questions about mass incarceration or unequal sentencing or unequal police treatment. Is that solely a matter of reforming criminal justice laws and police department practices? Or ultimately, is there a whole series of other issues that have to be addressed simultaneously?
I think it requires a cultural shift in the decision makers within the criminal justice system. I'll give you a good example. St. Louis County now is going through negotiations with the U.S. Department of Justice to get to a consent decree dealing with juvenile courts. Just like the practices and patterns investigation done in Ferguson, we did one in St. Louis County juvenile courts and found numerous constitutional violations against juveniles in St. Louis County. But here's the problem. Right now, the circuit court that has jurisdiction over St. Louis County is resisting the agreement. They're resisting the negotiation with the U.S. Department of Justice. So we as a community have to impress upon our judges in St. Louis County, get to an agreement. Get to the agreement, deliver justice for these young people. do not have all of these conflicts of interest there. Do not have children trying to negotiate with a court without adequate legal counsel. It's just all kinds of atrocious outcomes in St. Louis County Juvenile Court, and the disparities are along racial lines.
Whether you're talking about this negotiation or the consent decree in Ferguson, would it be your opinion that the Justice Department under President Obama has been a lever for local communities to try to seek change in this area? Have they been a diligent watchdog on local law enforcement around the country?
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For sure. I mean, I want to, I've thanked former Attorney General Eric Holder numerous times. Thanked the President for his involvement in the incident, in the whole Ferguson affair, and have worked closely with Loretta Lynch on getting to a settlement and getting the city of Ferguson to sign a consent decree. So they have been very helpful in that respect.
What would be the implications if a Trump Justice Department withdraws from that kind of pressure both here and elsewhere?
No, I will, whomever is selected as the U.S. Attorney General, I'll make my feelings known to them and ask my colleagues to make our feelings known to that new administration in the Justice Department. The importance of the consent decree, the importance of the involvement of the federal court that oversees the agreement between the city of Ferguson and the U.S. Department of Justice. Remember, there will still be career professionals in the Civil Rights Division, no matter who is over the department.
Do you worry that there will be any effort either here or elsewhere to undo or simply just kind of a benign neglect of consent decrees that have already been reached with local officials, local law enforcement in Ferguson or elsewhere?
I think that would be rather difficult, especially when you have the parties that have come together and have and agreed to these terms and conditions.
So it would be difficult for them to walk away from it.
I don't envision it.
Another area that you have talked about over the years, your initial reaction, I think, after Ferguson focused a great deal on diversity in police departments. Data suggests it's still a significant issue. How do you assess progress here in the state?
Well, I'd take Ferguson first and look at the changes that have occurred in that community over the last 2 years. When the day Michael Brown lost his life, the city of Ferguson's city council had one African American on it out of 6. Now that ratio has changed 4 to 2 African American to white. I look at the city manager. City manager now is African American. The police chief is African American. You have a more representative form of government. The prosecutor is gone. That was there at the time. The municipal judge is gone. That was there at the time. You have a more representative form of government to deliver justice and fairness to the people of Ferguson. Ferguson is only one community. But I do believe that the surrounding communities have seen the changes that have occurred in Ferguson, and they should get it, and they better get it.
This area has been so extensively studied in the last few years, whether it's by the Justice Department or the Ferguson Commission or other reports, and the fragmentation, just again, as an outsider, the extraordinary fragmentation of courts and police departments and the difficulty of having any kind of systemic reform when you must constantly kind of start again every couple miles. Is there any long-term answer to that, or is that just a permanent feature in the landscape, that level of fragmentation?
Well, the discussion is taking place in this community about consolidation, about the city re-entering St. Louis County. The discussion is ongoing. Now, the state legislature attempted to address all of this fragmentation as far as municipalities passing out their system of justice. That they passed a law.
The SB, was it SB 5?
Yes.
Yeah.
And now it's caught up in
courts,
in litigation.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's bring in the audience for a few minutes. We have a couple microphones. If folks have questions for the congressman, let's see. I'm sure we have some. Who wants to be first? Got one over there? No? Anyone? Yes, there's one over there.
Yes, I'm Rick Armstrong, citizen, and police cameras are a great idea, but they're tremendously expensive in terms of hardware and maintenance and IT support and storage. Let's say that you were given my question partly is that really the best use of the money? Let's say you're given a pot of money that just happens to be 100% what you need for cameras, or 100% what you need for preschool education, parental involvement, nutrition. How would you split that pot?
I would probably evenly divide it. Now, let me say this about cameras. In communities that have them, it has certainly made a difference in protecting citizens as well as police officers, because the facts are there in front of you. And that helps authorities determine what actually occurred. And so I believe that the cameras are good for the public as well as for law enforcement, because it's been proven that it cuts down on the number of complaints that are lodged because the evidence is there in front of us. And I mean, of course, people become biased because they interpret the evidence the way they want to. But I think it helps us sort out, in most instances, what actually occurred and what the facts are. Thank you for the question.
We got one over, oh, now we're going. Here we go. We got one over here. See, somebody to go first.
Mary Ann McGivern, St. Louis. I'd like to ask you a little about the pardon process, where someone in St. Louis in your district has a son or a daughter applying for pardons. Would it be any help for them to call your office? Could you investigate? Can you help at all with? It feels like we have a very limited amount of time to accomplish a lot with pardons.
Yeah, and for sure, at the state level as well as at the federal level, our office would be more than pleased to take a look at it and to hopefully be able to help families and recommend the partner or co-sign on it and get it in front of the Justice Department or in front of the governor's office. Feel free to call us.
Hi, I'm Tori Fick. I'm from U City, and I wanted to thank you for representing me so well. I had a question for those of us who are interested in reforming criminal justice. Lots of times we'll, receive emails saying, call your representative. Well, I never call you because I know you're on my side and you're going to vote the way I would like you to vote. But I do feel like I need to make my voice felt in Washington, and I was wondering if you could suggest to us who are interested in this movement how we can get it onto the agenda and make sure that the momentum is not lost.
Yeah, sure. Great question, too. I think that one way is to also contact your 2 U.S. senators. The other way is that there is a 1-800 number for the U.S. Capitol, and if you call that number, they will connect you to any congressional office you want. It's like a telephone tree. And if you call, and people call all day, so we have staff dedicated to answering those phones, and they keep tallies of how many calls come in for or against an issue. And if you organize those kinds of telephone trees, we find it to be effective, or at least it gets the attention of the members of Congress.
Let me ask you a final question. I mean, the other side of this is a community that is suffering under a high level of violent crime and has seen murders move back up. In the campaign, criminal justice reform was often presented from Mr. Trump and some of his allies as inimical to fighting crime, that it was in effect, that police departments are being intimidated from protecting the communities and enforcing the law. Are those two goals in conflict, reducing crime and increasing a sense of fairness, or can they be compatible?
Well, they shouldn't be in conflict. I think that you have to conduct, law enforcement has to conduct themselves in a constitutional manner. In other words, this stop and frisk has been proven to be unconstitutional, so why implement it? And why profile people? And so we have to have some ethics there among law enforcement also. And look, everybody wants good law enforcement for their community. They want to feel safe and protected by the people who we hire to keep us safe. And so it doesn't have to be either or, but it has to be what's best for communities.
Congressman Lacy, you've given us a lot to think
Thank you,
about
sir.
today.
Thank
Congressman
you
Clay,
so
thank
much.
you.